Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome journalist, author, and American citizen, Tucker Carlson.
And I like it. And American citizen. Oh, good for him. That is quite the accomplishment.
Thank you.
There's Peter Navarro, fresh out of jail. Fresh out of prison, I think.
Thank you. I've been... Good to see you. Thank you.
Haven't seen you in a while, right, Tucker?
I know about half the people in the room. This is wild.
Because you're one of the elites.
What are you doing? Justin Wells. Thank you, guys.
Are you talking about those private messages where you talked about your disdain for Donald Trump?
Peter Navarro is back. Welcome to Peter Navarro. Suffering the fate that has happened to so many who are friends with Donald Trump. Thank you for having me. I have been to many conventions. I have never been to a more fun convention or a convention with better vibes. They literally let Navarro out of prison. First of all, thank you. This feels a lot different from what I thought it was going to feel like. I can't hear you, but I know it's something good.
Navarro's, I think, trying to come up because he mentioned him, and he's like, no, I don't want you as part of my speech. Don't be ridiculous.
What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania about 50
I'd rather have you back in prison.
I think I was one of about 8 billion people around the world who watched it. And the more I watched it, the more it struck me that everything was different after that moment. Everything. This convention is different. The nation is different. The world is different. Donald Trump is different. When he stood up after being shot in the face, bloodied, and put his hand up, I thought at that moment, that was a transformation. This was no longer a man. Well, I think it was divine intervention. But the effect that it had on Donald Trump, he was no longer just a political party's nominee or a former president or a future president. This was the leader of a nation. And
I will say, as a broadcaster, his way of handling the speech, like he's a good speaker.
In Washington, where the president,
it's natural, it's conversational.
But if you think about it, the presidency comes with great power, obviously. But if you think about it, that is a title that is bestowed by a process of some sort that can be subverted. And in the end, it does not confer by itself, as no title does, legitimacy. Just because you call yourself the president doesn't mean that much inherently. I can call my dog the CEO of Hewlett-Packard. It doesn't mean...
Charlie's my special little prince.
It's true.
And he is.
And you hate to say it, but it is also true, is a fact, that you could take, I don't know, a mannequin, a dead person, and make him president. No, you could. You could. I'm just saying theoretically possible. With enough.
That's a dig on Biden.
With enough cheating, that could happen.
Come on.
But being a leader is very different. It's not a title. It's organic. You can't name someone a leader. A leader is the bravest man. That's who the leader is. That is true in all human organizations. This is a law of nature. And in that moment, Donald Trump, months before the presidential election, became the leader of this nation. That was the most obvious to me. And I have to say, I think it changed him. I reached out to Trump within hours of it that night. And
it might have, Cenk. I mean, that's a traumatic thing to go through. You never know.
But we don't know that.
We don't know. We don't know yet. Right.
He said only how amazed he was and how proud he was of the crowd, which didn't run. And I thought two things. The first thing I thought was, well, of course they didn't run. His courage gave them heart. A leader's courage gives courage to his people. And the second thing I thought was, this is the selfish guy I've been hearing about for 9 years? Really? Not a word about himself? About his people, period. And the second thing I noticed, which I don't think anyone has remarked upon in public, but I'm just going to since I don't have a script, like why not? Is that He turned down the most obvious opportunity in politics to inflame the nation after being shot. To inflame the nation, which is an opportunity that almost every other politician I've ever met, and certainly his opponents, would have taken instantly. And they would have said, well, what is this? How did he get shot? Like, how did this happen? And those are real questions that we have to get to the bottom of. But
so you're inflaming the nation now.
Yeah, I mean, Tucker is at the moment.
The week after the shooting, he did not say
to
that.
Trump's credit, he hasn't yet inflamed the nation after an assassination attempt, and that is uncharacteristic of Trump.
This is the most responsible,
I know, but it's a no-brainer
behavior of a leader I think I've ever seen.
I know, but there's all sorts of no-brainers that Trump obviously violated.
Where is he
right?
leading us?
No, I'll take it, but it's like a low bar.
Yeah, it is. Okay, fair. That's fair.
I think the entire point from the famous escalator ride 9 years ago until today of Donald Trump's public life has been to remind us of one fact, which is a leader's duty is to his people, to his country, and to no other. That's the point. That's the only point. And another word for this is democracy. Democracy, in case you're a little sick of being beaten in the face with democracy on television, actual democracy is the proposition that the citizens of a country own that country. They're not renters, they're not serfs, they're not slaves, they are the owners of the country. And for that to be true, their leaders have to represent them, which is another way of saying they have to do what the people want them to do, or a close approximation thereof. But if they completely ignore what people want, not just 1 year, but generationally, say for 50 years, then it may be, I don't know what, it's not a democracy. And so I think the entire Trump project, paradoxically, is attacked as an enemy of democracy, is to return democracy to the United States. Hey, let's pay attention.
Everything he said before that was fine, and then he just made that part.
But how? I want to know how. Like, explain to me how he does that.
Washington is something that ultimately drove me out of the city.
Like, how did Trump return democracy?
Yeah, exactly. He just made that part up.
Bodies of their fellow citizens ODing on drugs to go cast votes to send money to some foreign country. Yeah, actually, we've lost more Americans from drugs in the past 4 years than we lost in World War II. Yeah, our bloodiest war. More than we lost in World War II. Does anybody care?
I do. I care deeply about that. But I would like politicians to stop campaigning on that and then doing nothing about it.
We know where the drugs are coming from. We know the supply routes. The U.S. military spent billions bombing the Ho Chi Minh Trail. You don't see our commander-in-chief suggesting that we use our military to protect our country or the lives of its citizens. No, that's for Ukraine. And it's too much, actually. It's too insulting. It's too insulting. It's a middle finger in the face of every American. It's a very clear statement, which is unmistakable. And that is, we don't care about you. And Donald Trump...
Is that also true for money to Israel?
To be fair to Tucker, he has said that. He's on the record saying that.
I know, but to be unfair to Donald Trump, he gives unlimited money.
Without perspective or without empathy, which is true.
And it was a decision, clearly, to not mention Israel. And
he actually cares. Because he's interested in the people who live here, because that's his job. A father's job, his duty is to his family. An officer's duty is to his men. A president's duty is to his citizens. And he seems to be the only one who thinks that. And in his choice for vice president, JD Vance, he's made that really clear. JD Vance, I'll say this about him, is a thoroughly decent man, and I'll just admit it, a friend of mine, one of the very few politicians in Washington who actually is very close to his own wife, which is wonderful to see. And she's wonderful, actually.
He doesn't like JD Vance.
But JD Vance has
That's my guess. I don't know
closer to Trump's voters than anyone else.
He doesn't like Trump. We know he doesn't like Trump based on private communications that were made public as a result of that defamation lawsuit.
I think his tell is him closing his eyes when he's
and shaking his head as he says whatever he's saying.
Yeah.
Since the debate, and particularly on Saturday in Butler, I think a lot of people are wondering, what is this? This doesn't look like politics. Something bigger is going on here. I think even people who don't believe in God are beginning to think, well, maybe there's something to this. Actually.
Why did God kill Corey?
And I'm starting to think it's going to be okay, actually. I do think that. In the day after the midterm elections in 2018, Antifa came to my house. The Democratic Party's militia, okay? I was at work. It was obvious when I was at work because it was public. My wife was home alone. They tried to come in through the front door. They terrorized her. She hid in our pantry. It was on television. It was horrible, actually. It was, I mean, I'm not whining about it.
In the pantry
wasn't getting shot in the face, but it wrecked our day. And the next morning, we're lying in bed, and the phone rings for my wife, and it's Donald Trump, who's not like a regular text buddy of Donald Trump's. She picks it up, hello? Susie, it's Donald Trump. And it's coming through, I could hear it. You know, I'm lying in bed, whoa. And the first thing he says is, I'm gonna stand guard outside your house. And she goes, oh, it's so nice. And he says, I'll never forget this as long as I live. He says, you know, there's a lot of hate out there. And she said, you know, there is, Mr. President. And then he says, but there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love.
And if that story's true, it's nice that he called.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
it's human love. And I'll just stop with this. I'm not always convinced that I'm on the right side. I've been on the wrong side many times. You'll never hear me say I'm on God's side or God's with me or even I'm with God. I want to be.
I think you're just implied it, though.
But I will say this unequivocally and conclusively. God is among us right now. And I think that's enough. God bless you.
Well, there's the whole speech.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Huh. It was a speech, but I thought it was going to go somewhere. It was just to say, like, Donald Trump's a good guy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, haven't you noticed that all of the speeches have been about that? Right?
No, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole point of the convention is to fluff Donald Trump. I know that.
I know.
Right, but like, you usually provide specifics, right? And he did this, and I love that, and he did that, and then that's why you should vote for him.
The theme, hold on. The theme that I'm touching on is every speech attempts to paint Donald Trump as a decent human being, like the soft side of Trump, if you will, right? And so he gave that example of him calling Tucker's wife to.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. Yeah. Look, I think I'm probably nitpicking and that they're doing it a little ham-handed way. You're supposed to squeeze in those anecdotes that tell you about how wonderful a human being he is within the context of a different speech, right? Hey, I'm ostensibly talking to you about a policy or something along those lines. That's usually how the speeches go. But in the midst of telling you that, but let me just tell you real quick who Donald Trump really is. He called my wife after, et cetera, and that's how you normally do it. So it's a little heavy-handed, but you know what? I'm nitpicking because I don't think people are gonna notice that much. I think people they don't know all the old conventions, right? They're just gonna look at it and go, oh, okay, I guess, man, everybody's saying he's such a nice person. And so to your point, Anna, Susan Wiles is the campaign manager now, along with the
Chris Lasavidia.
Yeah, I'm having trouble pronouncing his name. But but Wiles apparently is the main driving force here. And she is the one that turned Florida from basically back when she was with Ron DeSantis, they had a falling out, but from like close swing state to now Republicans winning by 20. She's really good at this. And you could tell in 100 different ways how good she is at this. So be worried about her, okay?
Yeah.
And this is her hand because she knows that the number one issue that Donald Trump has is he's a dick, okay? And so she's softening that up.
Yes, it's a very obvious strategy and you are correct. Just to give you a sense of how good she is at crafting a good campaign strategy. You know, this whole no taxes on tips proposal that we've been hearing over and over again from Donald Trump, that was very much intentional to attract voters in Nevada. Because I mean, think about it. Nevada, you have a much larger population of service workers who get paid based on tips mostly. And so it's all about crafting your message to hit certain swing states and attract the vote in those swing states. And in regard to this convention, I don't know, Jake, like I've been saying this over and over again, but it is a completely different feel from the absolute chaos in 2016. 2016 was chaotic. Like there was nothing really memorable about it other than the fact that we came away feeling that it was chaos. And there was no real message, no consistency among the speeches. at this convention, it's very obvious that everything is very finely tuned. Everything is very much intentional. There have been a lot of speeches by like literal ordinary people, right? And John and I were talking about that off air, and he's just like, it is a good strategy to kind of give the floor to ordinary Americans when one of the main strategies of this campaign is to attract ordinary Americans in order to attract working class people, attract the Rust Belt, which feels understandably furious about their economic conditions and the loss of manufacturing jobs.
Yeah, she's moderating the crap out of his image.
Yep.
She's making him seem a lot more moderate, right?
And he's listening to her.
Yeah, and he's so far, she has him under control. Let's see if that sticks. But I'm worried. She's a really good campaign manager. The other guy is Chris LaCivita. He's the guy who did the swift boat attack against John Kerry.
That's right.
And that was very, very effective.
Yep.
So look, it looks like he's got 2 killers on his side now in terms of politics. And so, and that's why you see the Teamsters president here. That's a bold, stroke that I think was well played, et cetera. And she's trying to make, if you're watching the whole convention, which is a big if, right? But even if you saw just a snippet of a speech, she's trying to make sure that you see him as a normal human being and not a wild maniac who could do something crazy at any moment, right? Because that's his number one problem. People think he's crazy, right? And so,
which some are arguing that's a good thing, right? Peace through strength.
That's what Rudy Giuliani was saying earlier. Okay, so there's Trump's going to speak tonight, so that's the video that they'll have a lot of these videos of hyping him up, right? It's very standard in a convention. So I want to go back to Tucker Carlson's speech for a second. So he said some things that were true, and the really great trick that Tucker Carlson does, and you'll see now that once I tell you, you'll see it every time he speaks, which hopefully won't be that many times. He will start with something that is very true and get you going, okay, and then he'll even oftentimes say a second thing that's true. Then he'll make a totally irrational turn that is not logically connected at all, but he does it so smoothly that his audience doesn't pick up on it.
He's very good at that.
Yeah. So first, let me just say one thing that he said that was true, that was lead up to something else later. One was he said the crowd was really courageous. He said that Trump was impressed that the crowd didn't run. And I have to say, I've been meaning to say that this whole time, and I keep forgetting to say it. I think that's very true. When I was watching the tapes in the first place, I'm like, why is the crowd not running? Shots are ringing out and they're not even moving, right? I know that they were partly shocked, partly they're seeing is Trump okay? And anyway, I just thought the crowd was really courageous. And so I want to give them credit for that. I never got a chance to do that. And of all people, Tucker's reminding me of that, but he did, and that is true, okay? Then he went into about how Trump's a leader, right? And first he started talking about who a leader is, right? A leader is not something that you gain from status or title, it's something you earn when people actually follow you. That is so true.
Yeah.
So he starts out with something fundamentally true, okay? Then he says leaders, the main thing that defines them is being brave. There's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. It's not the only thing that defines a leader. But okay, we're still at very true, right? And then he says, and that's why Donald Trump's the leader of this nation, period, and it's already over. Like, wait a minute, now you just took a giant leap, right? So was he brave in that moment? Yes, but that doesn't mean that he was leading the whole nation. It's like, somehow we all now agree with his policies and we all agree to be led by him, because he was shot at and he was brave for some period of time afterwards. Okay, what if, by the way, there's a lot of people who've been shot at, right? And Hitler was shot at. I don't know if he was brave or not in that particular moment or the several times that they tried assassination attempts on Fidel Castro, Hitler, you can fill in the blank, right? Or good guys like FDR, et cetera. So if they were brave in that moment, does that mean we have to all follow them? See, that's not a logically connected thing. So that one was at least arguable, but he made the jump. Now the next one was way bigger jump. So he's like, there's money that are going to foreign countries and it should be staying here in America. Now, perfectly fine point to make overall, and especially America First crowd, very logical to make, and they love it. And okay, I don't begrudge you that. That's your philosophy, no problem. Okay, so then he starts talking about, okay, we have to protect our own people, and the drug problem killed so many people. He had one fact that was wrong there. He said killed more people than the bloodiest war we had, which was World War II. Actually, that's not true. The bloodiest war we had was Civil War. We lost more people in Civil War than any other war. But that's okay, it's a minor error, right? And so then he says, so in order to protect us from, instead of helping foreign countries, which is where we started, you have to protect the American people, okay, fine. And that's why we bombed the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Wait, what? Okay, you took like the weirdest leap there. And he's saying, oh, we were protecting the people by bombing the American people by bombing Ho Chi Minh Trail. No, we weren't. We're just slaughtering Vietnamese people for almost no reason.
Yeah.
And he's implying that we should be bombing Mexico or China for producing or bringing in fentanyl. He said, oh, we know where the trade routes are. And that's why he mentioned the Ho Chi Minh Trail, like we know the routes. What are we gonna do, bomb Mexico?
Yeah, no.
We're gonna start World War
Crazy.
III with
That's
China?
crazy.
See, he starts with something true, and then at some point he suddenly jumps to something that isn't remotely true. It's actually kind of a brilliant trick. And so a lot of con men start with something that's true and then get you going, oh yeah, and gain your confidence, because they're confidence men. And then they switch it to what they want instead of what you want, to something untrue instead of something that is true.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Of course, yeah, I totally agree with you. And I feel it myself, right? Like he'll draw you in, and I'm just like, he brings up the drug overdoses in the country, which I'm furious about, and I'm furious that our government has done nothing about it, really. And it's like, okay, he's drawing me in, and then he does that pivot, and it's like, oh, that was your way of setting us up to agree that we should, potentially bomb areas of Mexico, which he says are the delivery routes or whatever for fentanyl. It's just, that's not the correct policy. Okay,
they make plenty of fentanyl here in America. We started fentanyl, okay? And the problem isn't a supply problem. The problem is demand.
Right.
We've got to stop taking fentanyl. So in order to do that, we've got to create programs that help people get off of fentanyl and not get on in the first place. To just bomb Mexico is the dumbest possible solution to the fentanyl problem.
Let me be clear about one other thing. I do not want people who are struggling with addiction to end up in prison, okay? I want them to be compelled to get rehabilitated. But when it comes to traffickers get caught, they need to be prosecuted, and I want to lay down the law. Okay, this idea that oh, the poor traffickers, it's because they're hungry. I don't care if they're hungry. They're destroying communities. They should be in prison, okay?
Yeah, so that's perfectly fine. Invading China over fentanyl, not
crazy.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So now back to what he said about JD Vance. So here's how you can tell that he doesn't like JD Vance. He had two tells. One I think is clear, and you'll agree with me. The other one is just speculation. The clear one is he said he was pretending that he was really friend. He literally said, "I'm friends with him," right? But he started by saying, "JD Vance, I'll say this." Now that's when you say something about someone you don't normally like, but I'll say this about them, right? That's his tell. Why would you start that way? I wouldn't say with Anna Kasparian, well, I'll say this about her.
Yeah, that's true. I'd be like,
well, what do you mean? What do you mean? I'll say just this about them?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why does he, and in my opinion, not like JD Vance? Because JD Vance is a direct competitor for the populist lane
100%.
in the Republican Party.
100%.
Tucker Carlson was hoping to take over for Donald Trump. He wanted that lane.
Yeah.
And now JD Vance owns that lane. So Tucker's got to be super bitter about it. And remember, Tucker is a completely different person off air than he is on air. So off air, he hates these guys.
He hates Donald Trump. I mean, we know it based on his text messages to producers at Fox News, which were uncovered through the discovery process in that defamation suit.
Yeah, so, and if you notice, he didn't actually say anything complimentary about JD Vance other than he has a wife that loves him. And I was like,
oh, that's such a good point.
I was like, that's the best you got on JD Vance? No compliments on policy, no compliments on courage or anything along those lines, right? So I know Tucker. I know when he's gonna make the turn. Literally, I said it during the speech, watch, here comes the turn, right?
Yeah.
And I know which way he's leaning based on how he tells the lie, how he tells the story, right? So the one that was a little bit speculative is the one I mentioned during the speech, which is when I think his tell is when he closes his eyes. So every time he says something nice about, he didn't say it about Trump. And we know in the past he hated Trump, and I'm positive he still does. But he's so used to lying about Trump, right? I mean, he's done it thousands of times about how much he loves him, et cetera, when he absolutely hates him. But with JD Vance, he could barely contain himself. So whenever he mentions something nice about JD Vance, he closes his eyes like this. He like squinted like, JD Vance is a really good guy. So that was speculative. I don't know if that's like, I have to see it a bunch of times before I said, yeah, definitively. But I did notice that was the only time he squinted and closed his eyes during no speech.
It's a good way of disassociating.
Yeah, maybe, maybe. Okay. Although I shouldn't give away his tell. I should let him keep squinting his eyes. I hope he doesn't watch this.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks. We really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.